All right. Already. I'll do this. Everybody has not asked me to do this, but I'm gonna do it anyway. So the LeBron, my bad, Michael Jordan versus LeBron James debate. And a side note before we get started, I was thinking this as I was saving my file. I'm like, how come it's not Jordan versus James? That's both of their last names. That kind of makes sense. I get, you got the one word or one name nickname nouns, LeBron, but we know his last name is James, LeBron James. Michael Jordan, one's his first name, one's the last name, one's the first name. Why can't it be Michael versus LeBron? You know who we talking about. Or James versus Jordan, the alliteration. But anyway, sorry. All right, so here's the biggest thing, and hear me clear, because I already know. First of all, when we have this discussion, people come in preloaded already to say what they're going to say. But this is what people got to understand about any debate, especially this one. You have to qualify what the question is. The reason the debates get so back and forth and heated is because people are arguing two different things. This always happens. And so, when I'm talking about this debate, Michael Jordan versus LeBron James, Jordan versus James, I am asking and answering the question, who is the greatest player? Not who could win a one-on-one, because look, understand, basketball, there's a reason there's 10 people on the court at a time. Like, it's 5-on-5 game. Yes, you can play one-on-one. That's not what this is. So it's not who could beat who in a one-on-one. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about teams versus teams with this Heat team or this Lakers team beat this Bulls team. We're not doing that. And funny note on the side that I love this. People will always find a way to bring in other people's commentary from like quote unquote experts, players or whatever. They'll bring that in to make their point. It's like, or to disqualify someone's point, excuse me. And so it'll be like, I don't believe this. Are you kidding me? Larry Bird said that himself. And then they use that to disqualify your statement. But then when someone does it to them, they want to ignore it. And so people love to pick and choose when to quote people. But to just say this, Michael himself, other legends, and current NBA players have told you can't compare eras. You can't. And I would 100% I say you can't. In a hypothetical, if they were able to come and play, would you be able to play the game? Yes, obviously, but you can't compare eras because we can't do that. Two different time frames, and obviously nobody's the same age now. So there's a reason I'm not getting into that, because it's very speculative. In my opinion, rules matter a whole lot. As much as people try to say it doesn't, it's not just about, okay, what are the rules? Okay, let me do it. That's not how a high functioning athlete plays. It's really attuning your muscle memory and your body to doing certain things until it's quick and you can do it without thinking. You can't just take a college sophomore in 1 week play a college game or college sophomore cornerback, and then the next week play an NFL game. The rules are totally different as far as how he plays. So all his technique is off. And so the mindset, all that's different. I don't want to get into that. This is about the greatest player in an all-encompassing way. So that's number one. We got to qualify the question. Number two, we got to qualify the metrics. What are we looking at to determine this? And so for me, I'm pulling out 6 different categories. Simple: scoring, defense, passing, rebounding, leadership, and legacy. And then I'm going to also talk about the different context that goes along with both players, because that needs to be taken into consideration as well. All right, so now that we understand the layout and the guidelines of the debate, let's get into it. So let's start number one with scoring. Scoring to me is pretty easy. And before I even get into that, I have to say for those that might not listen to me, I use numbers to help inform the decision. I'm not a diehard numbers person. Everything is not in the numbers. Numbers lie. Numbers can dance. That's why we got to take into account context and all these other things. And number one, as a sports person, I'm very much how you do it versus what you do. Both are important, but I think how you do it is even more important because that helps you predict if you can repeat it. Now, obviously, with Michael, we've seen his career, so we know he was able to repeat it and all that. All right, in LeBron to an extent. So, okay, scoring to me is easy as Michael Jordan. I mean, Michael Jordan, and we'll get to the context as well, but I'll bring it up here. Michael Jordan was a scoring, phenomenon, unstoppable force at a time where defense was better. Like, I don't care what people say. Like, some people are like, oh, they just hit people. And it was more physical, yes, but the defense was better. The whole mindset was better. Like, there's no arguing looking at the way people play defense now. And a lot of players even so much as admit to it. And so defense was better. It was much more difficult. It to a certain extent, it makes sense now. You play in space and you make people defend you out in space. But back then it was clog the lane and then we're going to try to score in the lane. Now you would think with the lane clogged, they would try to score on the perimeter, but that's not the way they did it. And so they had the toughest route to go through. And Mike was that type of guy. And so not only what he was able to accomplish, numbers wise and scoring wise, but the type of competition or at least the strategies he had to go against. And so, I mean, Mike was an unstoppable force. Everybody has said it, just, kind of anecdotal as far as other people corroborating that. Numbers would tell you how prolific he was as a scorer. And even if you think about how he scored, and honestly, you think about, now obviously Mike got some stuff from other people, but you think about what his legacy led on for Kobe, and then even so to a certain extent, LeBron in his later career, Mike kind of laid out a nice blueprint for it. But there was a lot of good scorers back then, but Mike was the best at it. Whether you talking about going to the hole and being able to play above the rim, whether you're talking about the mid-range game, whether you're talking about taking someone off the dribble, posting them up, all that good stuff. So there you go with Mike. And LeBron, obviously, a really top-notch scorer as well. Not to say that he doesn't, get in the conversation when it comes to scoring, because he's kind of an unstoppable force. But I really think mentality and skill set-wise, Mike wins this category. All right, another easy one for me is passing. So this is definitely one where you got to understand more so the game than just looking at numbers. But LeBron from the beginning, and it is funny because like before LeBron even started playing, and even early in his career, a lot of people kept saying this whole, Magic comparison. He's much more of a passer than Mike is and a deferrer. Even now when people try to knock LeBron, they say, oh man, he passes up shots to his teammates. But then they turn around and the same people try to say Mike is a better passer. Like, no, LeBron is more of a passer, and by that I wouldn't say by that rationale, but part of that is why he is a better passer. And so LeBron from day one, like his court vision, his ability to diamond up. Like Mike, same in one of the same senses. One thing I always heard about growing up with Mike, Mike had gigantic hands. He had great ball control. And so he could make those tough cross-court passes and everything as well. But his vision and his temperament wasn't the same as LeBron. LeBron loves to set up teammates. He's perfectly fine being a decoy and doing all those things. And I think his court vision in general is more than Mike's ever was, and more than Mike probably ever wanted it to be. Mike said himself in the Last Dance documentary and throughout history, if you followed it, especially early on, he wasn't that interested in passing. And you can tell why. You saw where he came from with the original Bulls and how he had to help change the culture. And really, it just wasn't anybody that he trusted and was up to his level until you got a Scottie and a Horace. And then eventually the rest of them came on. And so with Mike, he said himself he had to learn as they got into the finals. When they got to the first finals and he started to become a champ, that's when he had to learn to trust his teammates. And Phil was a big part of that as well. So Mike just never was that type of guy as a passer. And I say he can't pass. Again, this is just who's better. So I get that one to LeBron. All right, so now we go to rebounding. And this one is closer than people might give it credit. But I'm going with LeBron. I think, the guy's 3 inches taller, a lot heavier, still, especially in his prime, still could jump. I don't know. I guess you could look at vert, but I don't really know if they ever measured how high each person could get. But I would imagine LeBron gets up there, if not higher than Mike. And so Mike was not no punk as far as rebounding, but he liked the guys that rebound for him, like the Horace. That was one thing before they got Rodman and they lost Horace. They said it was a pretty big gap as far as their rebounding. It was noticeable. And he wanted, and every team wanted, the big guys that can clean the boards like that. And so by position, technically, LeBron would be around the boards more. But, and I don't think that LeBron's some ferocious rebounder, which is why I said it's closer than some people would say. I think they both rebound when they have to. I just think physical skill set, LeBron just naturally has that ability. Looking at their best rebounding seasons, LeBron had more, but Mike got boards, so not going to knock him there. But you look at the averages, LeBron's just got more boards. And again, it's not just the numbers thing. It's just, to me, again, 6'9", 250. There you go. All right, so then we go to defense. So with defense, for me, is Michael. Definitely. Sorry, I don't know why I was pausing on that. I don't think this one's that close. Defensive player of the year is one thing, but again, you watch the film, you watch the interviews, all that stuff. Not only would Mike guard, one-on-one, he wanted to guard one. He wanted to pick people up. He wanted to take that challenge on. And I think a lot of people that aren't athletes are definitely going to dismiss this, but the mindset does matter. And hopefully The Last Dance showed that more than anything, but the mindset does matter a lot when you're talking about psychology. That's why they have a whole sports psychology sector, because the mindset to want to defend and to lock up with somebody and go one-on-one, man-to-man, that does matter. And so Michael doing that against some greats, that does speak a lot. But then also the results of it, again, how he did it, taking on it. He wasn't just who's the weakest player? Let me go guard him. No, he said, let me pick up, some of the best defenders. Sometimes they switched it. And again, they had to switch Scottie to Magic and all that stuff. Eventually he had to defer because Scottie was a better defender. But Mike was never scared of it. And so that mindset helped him, I think, just play harder on that side of the ball, where in general, this league now doesn't care that much about defense as the league used to. And so there's that. But, you see the plays Mike made against, it didn't really matter. He made plays against big guys, blocks and steals. He ripped up, ball handlers. He defended guys with handles. He did all that. And LeBron could guard 1 through 5, especially in today's day and age. But he'll be there, but he ain't gonna lock nobody down. That was the moment when LeBron had the chase down block. That's cool. But to me, I never really appreciated that because, help side, yeah, that sometimes. But a lot of times, but what is it? What is his ability to stay in front of a person? And LeBron, to me, never had that. I mean, I wouldn't say never had that, but that was never his elite skill. And so I think Mike, I mean, you look how many times he made defensive player or all team defensive player, not defensive guard, all defensive team. There we go. You look how many times he did that. And again, you look at the way he did it. I just think you got to give Mike that. And it's not that nobody ever busted Mike on offense, but I think you got to give Mike that. And so that's scoring and defense to Mike. That's passing, rebounding to LeBron. So we tie here. So, okay, we got to go leadership. Now, I already know because I try to think about this. Leadership is tough. This is a really, really, really tough one to decide. You gotta really go through the nuances of this because we've seen on display for the world now Michael and his character with his teammates. Now, again, as I mentioned when I was talking about The Last Dance in another episode, if you grew up in Chicago around that time especially, you heard these things before. And again, I'm realizing now that like it is really, kind of about the city because it wasn't widespread media like it is now. And so it was pretty much like if you were around the city, you would hear these things. But if you weren't in Chicago, you probably didn't hear these things about Mike. So to us, it might be common knowledge, but now it's really out there. And LeBron, as much as we hear things, we don't have video cameras in his practice right now and releasing that stuff all the time. But we do hear about it. So here's the thing. We know Mike. I'm going to leave that to the side for now. So we got to look at LeBron. Young LeBron in Cleveland, I think was genuinely liked by most of his teammates. I mean, obviously he had a real tight friendship with Virgil. I think those obviously were foundational years. He was only 18. He was growing up into a man, and it was about the game of basketball. Then you went to the Heat. And I don't know that you ever really had any, big squabbles. You had Mike that really wanted Pat Riley instead of Eric Spoelstra, and we've heard many credible people say he was trying to get Eric Spoelstra out of there. But outside of that, it was his friends, Wade and Bosh. Now, obviously, it was kind of growing pains in the beginning with the Heat, but ultimately, from everything we've heard, and again, I'm talking anecdotal, these are things as far as I know, it was Dwayne Wade who chose to take the back seat. He was the one that really, and I guess LeBron said this himself, so you got to take that into account. It was really Wade that said, if we're going to do this, you got to be the Batman. We got to be your Robins. Like, you got to be the lead dog. This has to be your team. And how well did he fit that role? We can debate that. But at the end of the day, I think the biggest show of leadership was by Wade. And not to say that people didn't like LeBron, but that's how that's one of the biggest things you got to think about. And Bosh, that's nothing really LeBron can do. I mean, y'all decided to be in the big three. You knew somebody was going to go down. And so there's that. He leaves the Heat. Not necessarily people happy about that, but that's not quote unquote bad leadership. Then he goes back to Cleveland. And this is where the switch, I think, happened. I think up until that point, it was kind of, happy-go-lucky with LeBron. When he went back to Cleveland, I think that's when this gets muddy. Because if LeBron had the same trajectory throughout his career, it'd be no problem. But once he went to Cleveland, things went a different way. Now, Kyrie Irving is his own type of dude, as we know. But still, you can't discount the fact that a star who you helped, well, really, he hit the shot, but you helped him win a ring, and he leaves. Like, I mean, there's definitely some, and we'll get to the context, there's some alpha dog, there's some kind of softness in the league today, and so there's definitely that. But at the end of the day, he left, and now, like, the Wiggins thing, he got kind of forced out before getting a chance, so they get K-Love so he can have another big three. And LeBron to this day continues to act like he has nothing to do with the team. And it is such BS. I mean, you got Kawhi Leonard, one of the most quiet, non-speaking dudes out there. And through the leaks, we could hear some of the stuff he was demanding teams to do. You can only imagine what LeBron was demanding. So for LeBron to act like he just has nothing to do with anything is silly. I mean, the man burns through coaches. Luke Walton was dead. Oh, we didn't get to the Lakers, but coaches be gone. So LeBron does these things and he wants it his way, and that's his right. He can exercise that as the star he is, but you got to take that into account that might not rub everybody the right way. And then there was this whole thing with LeBron after he left Miami where it was kind of like, I'm big brother. And he really has this I'm big brother thing to people that I feel like don't want it. That's how I always felt when he went back to Cleveland. Because it was just like, I know what it takes to win now. I've been a champion. All these little things I'm going to take back to Cleveland and I'm going to show them and I'm going to teach the young ones the ways of winning. And like to a large extent, you can understand. On paper, that makes sense. It's true. But really, when you just look at the psychology and the egos of it, that could really rub people the wrong way, especially because there's the elephant in the room about him running to a big three. So I can understand some people might not like that, some people not. And then, of course, all the moves he did for the team. Then he goes to L.A., immediate friction with the younger players because, again, I'm big bruh. I'm big bruh LeBron. I'm Bron. I know how to win. I'm the guy. I'm going to help you. You should be happy I'm here. And I'd say he said that, but it can rub off that way to some people. And so immediate friction, those guys all go. Despite all the denials, somehow they end up going, I'm not, targeting AD. I'm not trying to get anyone traded. And they get traded and AD shows up. So there's that. And AD obviously is seeking that because he wants that. So there's a difference. And why I think, the games complement each other. But also, I think there's one of the difference in the camaraderie with the current Lakers. And it makes sense. You want to get guys who were vets and wanted to win. You got a guy who was seeking LeBron's tutelage and so all that. So in total, what does that amount to? It's tough to say. I don't think it's great. But also at the same time, I don't know if it's as bad as Mike. Because at Mike's side, much like LeBron, much like I said LeBron, Michael really had earned the stripes on the court. He really went out there and got the cachet. So when he comes in and he's telling you to do stuff or he's pushing you, I don't know it's so much that it's, hey, Michael's trying to help me be better. More so than that's Michael Jordan. I can't say anything against him. And you had a few people stand up to him, but for the most part, I mean, come on, like not even the practices, anything. The man said, like, look, I love Mike, but you can't deny the stuff he did. Like I forgot who it even was. Somebody was asking him for tickets and was like, thank God, or sitting next to God. And he was like, God just gave you the ticket or something like that. Basically, he was calling himself God. Told Reggie call him black. He didn't tell him to call him, but he said, don't talk crap to Black Jesus. Like Mike really was full of himself. So just to act like he put on a persona to push his team to get better, let's not act like that's all true. I think to me, 40% of it was Michael trying to push his team to get to a place where he's like, I want you to be ready in the toughest moments because it's going to get tough. 40% of it is that. Kind of like LeBron coming from Miami, even though Mike didn't win anything, he came through the battles with Detroit, with the Celtics and all that. And he came through the beatings. And so when it was time for them to shine, he was like, I need y'all to get tough because I know how hard it can be. 40% of it's that. 60%, I think, is his competitiveness. I think the other 60% is not just, I want to win that so much, but he wants to win all the time and he wants to dominate you. And part of that is showing you who the alpha is and making fun of you and ridicule you and tearing you down. And so I think his competitiveness definitely drove his leadership style. And you'd be crazy to say it didn't. You can't be that competitive in life and not influence your leadership style. And so Mike in the documentary said a lot of times, like, that's just how, that I didn't know any other way to lead. Like, that's the way I knew how to win. And we've seen that's not the only way to win, but that's the only way Mike knew because his competitiveness. And as a result, it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And again, we talk about Mike learning how to shoot. I think there's the definite part where he wants the pressure on his shoulders for the last moment shots. But then there's the other stuff where he's scoring most of the team points. And to a point where he had to learn to be champions, he had to start, playing team ball more. And his resistance to the triangle, all that. He talked about all that. And so I think he ended up getting to that point, but he wasn't always like that. So LeBron, as a person that defers, as a person that's trying to set you up in the best route, but also has a little bit of my way or the highway type thing, very slightly, and people are going to disagree with this, very slow. I don't know, man. I was about to say slightly I take LeBron, but that's just the teammate side. I guess the leadership also happens on the court too. And in that sense, there's the ultimate Mike is going to, I'm going to watch this. I'm going to honestly watch this. There's a lot of similarities, but you haven't seen, first of all, players just don't act the way Mike and guys used to. But on top of that, nobody was ever on Mike's level. You never seen somebody dog people like that. And trust me, if you know Mike or been around Mike or know people that have been around Mike in real life, it ain't just in basketball. It ain't just in basketball. So that is super hard to get over, but it's also hard to overlook his leadership on the court. LeBron is hard to overlook how much of a culture he can build with his teammates if you're the guys that he likes, if you're in his group. But on the court, obviously he's a leader, but he's not on Mike's level. So I'm going to watch it. So we still tied 2-2. So I guess it'll come down to this. Well, not completely, but legacy. Legacy to me isn't close. That's Michael Jordan. I mean, I won't even use the fact that he inspired LeBron and inspired Kobe. Like that doesn't necessarily mean, I mean, it's part of it, but I'm not going to take that away that you was inspired by him. I'm not going to use that, but Michael inspired, I guess it's the bigger point of not just inspiring LeBron. He inspired basketball in a lot of youth through the Dream Team, through the Mike Jordans, through the I Want to Be Like Mike, the NBA growing the brand based off Michael's name, making basketball a worldwide sport. And then the shoe game by itself honestly probably crushes LeBron. But then you also just got to think about he walked that path first. And I think I talked about this in my other episode too. I feel for LeBron in a lot of ways, but Mike walked that path first of having to be more than just a basketball player and being such an icon and having the eyes on him. And we'll talk about the context of social media, but Mike walked that path first, and so that's part of his legacy. Then the no game sevens, and then 6 rings. And oh my God, down the line, you just saw a whole documentary. That legacy is crazy. And LeBron, for as much as LeBron fans definitely could point to a lot of his great moments, and there's definitely great moments, you're never going to get the decision off. You're never going to get that off. I mean, and the decision, first of all, was directly basketball related. I think a lot of the big blemishes on Mike come off the court, but this was directly basketball related as far as LeBron. And for me personally, that completely changed the NBA. And it's a big reason that I don't watch basketball that much anymore anyway. unless it's playoffs, because the whole mentality changed, the whole competitiveness changed, and I didn't like that. And so it'd be really hard for me to get over that with LeBron. As great as him coming back to Cleveland was to win that championship, the whole Miami decision thing, doing it, and then the way he did it's just, it's negative. And so I think legacy goes to Mike. So now, lastly, let's talk a little bit about the context, and then we'll name it. So I'll start where I was saying before. Social media. Mike, we saw Mike. I mean, especially in his last year, Mike was smoking. Every time he went on the court, there was a cigar in his mouth. Then we know about his gambling addiction. It's an addiction. I don't care what he says. Like, if anybody that has dealt with people with addiction, you know the signs, you know all the telltales. So not even just his gambling and always smoking, always, trying to stay up. Like, Mike, and even now, you heard him say he resented. Like, if he could go back, he wish he wasn't. Like, he hates that limelight. And to his point, at that time, nobody, probably outside of Michael Jackson or something, had that type of star power. But if he has social media on his tail too, now, Jordan's children said that they don't think Mike would, or they don't think their dad would be a part of social media. But I don't believe that. I mean, I think there's a few people that do it, but for the most part, it's part of the brand. Because, like, again, we're talking about murky hypotheticals. But if let's say you did the original, Jordans, the Air Jordan 1, and it popped like it did, you really think that Nike would just allow you to continue that shoe without you being on social media? Now, you might not run it. You might have somebody run it for you, but you going to have social media. And people going to be, and even if you don't, people going to be able to talk about you. And then, you got, because Mike was reading first, and this is the funny part, Mike was reading papers. And we know, obviously, that's how everybody got information. But Mike was going through papers, looking for articles by specific people. Even when people did read papers, I mean, he be stalking your stuff. And so if Mike had more access to the information, and not just Chicago local stuff, but he could see all that, bro, Mike went nuts, fixating on what people said about him. If he was in the social media era, I mean, I'm not going to speculate enough to say how bad it would have got, but I think you would have seen a different side of Jordan. One that we kind of bully LeBron about a little bit. And LeBron's built different. Don't get that twisted. He's built different, but I still think you would have saw a different side of Jordan that we didn't necessarily have to see with social media. But on top of that, the players are softer. I mean, maybe people don't like that word, but they're softer. They're more sensitive. And so these are both LeBron points. LeBron has to deal with that social media, that scrutiny. And not only social media, it's the sports media is trash now. They're not fair. I mean, sometimes they weren't fair back then, but you really had to be vetted and stuff back then. Now, they just say whatever for hot takes. So LeBron has to deal with that scrutiny. He also has to deal with the players. Like, he's one of them, but he has to also play with the league full of these players that are a lot more sensitive. And I don't mean like Michael making up stuff to rile himself up. I mean sensitive, like upset, like not motivated. We're talking about upset. And the Kyrie Irvings, where some people could say that's on Kyrie Irving, who I think is good competition to want to run your own thing. Some people would say he was too soft. Whatever it is, you can't be like Mike was. You just can't. Even though LeBron's not built that way, even if he tried, you could not be that way today with these players. So there's that. The rules, as I mentioned, competition was a lot harder back then. I mean, it ain't just the hand checking. That's one thing, but the rate they call fouls, how physical they let you be in general, and then they putting in these new rules too. Like, bro, it's so much easier to score in the league. And there's still people that try to dispute that when the NBA themselves and everybody has told you that's the reason they started to do it, because they wanted more scoring. Just like the NFL, they said we want more scoring. And so they put in those rules to help more scoring happen, because to them that's what was more exciting. And so to say it's not easier to score today is just absolutely ridiculous. And hopefully you watch The Last Dance and you got that silly thought out of your mind. Like, it's way easier to score now. And so, again, I mentioned that before, Mike did have to deal with that at that time. Now, some people say, well, LeBron has to deal with super teams and Mike didn't. Number one, that's LeBron's fault. Number two, I think it's harder what Mike had to do. Again, The Last Dance isn't my first introduction to the Bulls. Like I said, I have a Dynasty series that I've had since I was a kid. My parents had it on VHS and I got the Blu-ray later. So I've watched this thing, dozens of times. I've seen every series from every championship year Mike played. The thing is, like, again, we could look at the end result, 4-0, 3-1, whatever. They played comp. And it wasn't every single team, but they played competition. A lot more teams were stacked. So I guess it comes down to your thoughts and opinions. But for me, what's worse, like going through teams have no chance to beat you, and then you're only gearing yourself up for the one challenge in the league? Or is it getting your best every night from teams that are good? And on top of that, teams that can physically punish you if they're not great. So there's that. You had a lot of really good teams. And like they said, stars didn't move a lot. Stars, just kind of stayed where they were. And so you really had to face good teams. And obviously it's easier in hindsight to say Michael, because all the people he played with have went on to be Hall of Famers or not. But LeBron is still going down that path. And so that's easier for us to say, but you still look at some of the people he went against. I mean, he embarrassed Patrick Ewing. Now, Patrick Ewing, Hall of Fame type player, cool. But he went up against Shaq. Now, he didn't go up against Lakers Shaq, but he went up against a young Shaq, which was maybe not as dominant, but more freaky. And Penny Hardaway was a bona fide star at the time. You have to go through that, while you also have to go through the Knicks, who really had their number a lot. Obviously, you had to go through the bad boys at one point in time. I mean, you got a lot of players. Now, if Mike did it in the West, I think we really wouldn't be having a conversation. But a lot of things happened. And then, he went through Charles Barkley. He went through Malone and Stockton. He went through Magic Johnson towards the back end. And so Clyde Drexler, all these people. So no, he didn't quote unquote go against superstar or super teams, but super teams don't just bring power to one team. They take a lot of power from other teams. And so I don't think you can, if we're going to count the difficulty of going against a team loaded, we got to count also going against the other teams that are playing trash because people are teaming up. So we got to look at that as well. I think that's mostly what I was thinking about as far as context of when they played. So on the attributes, Mike took it because leadership was a wash. But then throwing in the context, it's tough because I think some of that is very much applicable with the rules in basketball. Some of the stuff with social media and the scrutiny is indirect, and you don't know how that would have played out for Mike. Obviously, he was determined to win enough to go through being sick, to go through being injured, to go through the lifestyle being terrible, but he found his outlets. And so I think Mike would be determined enough, but we don't know how that would have played out. So I don't know. But anyway, the way I laid it out, and I showed you how I laid it out, I'm going with Mike as the greatest player. And I really think on the court is definitely important, but legacy is the biggest thing. And for the LeBron, pro LeBron people, definitely go to the comments to say this, but on his resume of legacy, like besides just pure stats, yes, he won 2 rings. To me, and a lot of people might not feel this, but to me that does sit with, a little bit of a taint with the super team. But him going back to Cleveland and winning, that was huge. Now also coming back from 3-1, being the only player to do that. So that's big on there too. But what else can we talk about? I mean, there's some people that's going to talk about school and stuff, and I'm not going to get into that because there's a lot of misinformation about some of that stuff. But it's nice. I mean, look, a lot of people don't get advertised about the stuff they do off the court philanthropy-wise. Not to say that people are doing what LeBron's doing. I mean, well, some people have, but not to say that, but it's definitely cool. I'm not going to say that's not. And yeah, I mean, what else though? Really? I mean, and part of it is timing. Part of it is Mike pioneering with the dream team, pioneering the global of basketball, pioneering, shoes becoming a sneakerhead thing. A part of it is timing, but you can't take that away from Michael as part of his legacy. And so to me, when it comes down to it, as far as just greatest player, that's all encompassing, I think that the legacy is really where Michael shines. And I think, if anything, The Last Dance showed you that it's really hard to discount that. The legend of Michael Jordan is just huge. So anyway, I did not think it was going to be this long, but it is what it is. So go to the comment section and let me know what you think. I'm sure a lot of people got their own picks about LeBron versus Michael. But remember, my bad. Jordan versus James. But remember, we're talking about the greatest player, all-encompassing, including legacy, leadership, on the court stuff as well. So it's not about who would have beat who in one-on-one, not whose team would have beat who, not who would have scored the most points and if they were in the same league, none of that. We're just talking about the greatest player in that term. So anyway, thank you for listening.